the world came a soul named Ida. And there she is. You see. But you see how greedy his eye is for every possible variation, every possible change and alteration in the surface. He goes over it like an ant, not like a bird, you see, and not like the eye usually, but just crawling, creepy crawling over and recording every single flicker on the surface of the world, and feeling that now then I really got it. See, I really have hold of it. And of course, that's not true. Let's look at the next two, and we can't think that it's real. It's as unreal as if it were a pastry figure. This problem is so deep in contemporary art that I can show you two wonderful examples, wonderful things that happen. Both of these paintings are by Jackson Pollock. And they're only 15 years apart. And that was at the end of the 30s over on the right, and this is at the very beginning of the 50s. Now, what's happened, you see, he has altered profoundly his conviction about what is the nature of reality. And that therefore, to continue to work with the surface insofar as he is working just with the surface and also with the rhythmical qualities of things, really is not enough. That you do not get to the reality that way. That what we know now is waves of probability. Let's look at the next two. Now, this is a man named Pearlstein, and on the right, you have a painting which he painted 15 years before he painted this. In other words, it's 15 years between them, but the movements in exactly the opposite direction. This was painted in the 50s, over on the right, was painted in the 50s, and this is painted in the 70s. See, he's moved in exactly the opposite direction. He's moved away from the idea of the forces and the invisibility and the fact that we see the surface of the world in our way is simply a matter of scale, simply a matter of the construction of the eyes and so on. He's moved back to the conviction that the surface of the world, in fact, to a very heated and very strong conviction, that the surface of the world is the only thing which is worth worrying with. And so he paints, not you see, this happens to, he almost always paints nudes, but it's never as a person that he's painting them, you see. It's never, much less as just a generalized nude. He cuts the head off or shows it in such a way that you have no sense. He has, again, his eyes are moving over it with the greatest care and the greatest conviction that what he's doing is real, and it's called realism, and he believes it's real. Let's look at the next two slides. Now, I think you must have noticed that there are not many of these examples which I've shown you that would really qualify for beautiful works of art. And, of course, the artist would tell you if you said, I don't think either the last two of Pearlstein's are, neither really are the ones of Pollock's. They would say, we're not interested in beauty, we're not concerned with beauty. But actually, if something has the kind of truth which is the actuality of being, it has its own beauty. And I think that you can see this. It is as if it is being, it is Dasein, it is being there, that both of these things are. It is just their sense of their absolute conviction of themselves, of their existence. And with that comes a kind of nobility or beauty. And I think you can see that when you see this, one of the quail over here, or of that rabbit. You see that is an ultimate, it's almost a Platonic rabbit, you see. It has this quality of ultimate. It has the quality of not searching any farther, not going any farther, of being exactly there. And that it gives us the same kind of feeling of repose. Let's look at the next two. The same sense of being satisfied that we call beauty. And it's right that the artist shouldn't be trying to be beautiful. Beauty shouldn't be the aim. Beauty should always be a byproduct. And reality is the aim, and always will be the aim. But when it gets to a certain point, then beauty asserts itself by the existence, by the quality of existence. And this is something which, there's a wonderful book by a woman named Vicki Hearn called Adam's Task. And if you haven't read it, I hope that some of you will get hold of it and read it. But she says that when a horse is well trained, you can tell whether a horse is well trained if it becomes beautiful. That an animal which is under training and becomes less than beautiful, the training is wrong. It's not true. And if it is true training, suited to the horse and to the end, the purpose, the horse becomes beautiful. And I think that that's exactly the same thing, you see, that happens with the painting. When the end is the end of a depth of reality, a profundity of meaning, that beauty is generated by that. And it is not anything which is thought about. It is simply a byproduct of the right way of doing it. And here you have, again, Dürer, 15th century, and a Japanese screen over on them. But you see, in both of them, beauty is generated by the truth. Let's look at the next one. And here, nearly 5,000 years between these two things. But again, the order of these animals, the processional quality of the cranes and of the geese of Meidum over on the farthest imaginable. The artists were farthest imaginable in their intention, but their intention was to be real, to see that it was true and real. And as a result of that, the beauty of these things comes to the fore. Let's look at the next ones. Here's another one. See, there's such a marvelous and surprising. It's that sense of something which is surprising, but when you see it seems inevitable. It's something which couldn't not have happened that way. And the Egyptian one, you just think for a moment of the aesthetic problem of all those legs that are exactly the same. I mean, how easily that could have been made something really boring and dreadful, and how instead it has this wonderful quality of movement, of procession, of the animal moving. It has the truth of the action, and therefore it has the beauty of it. Let's look at the next. Because it has that truth which is sometimes difficult and to find and difficult to achieve, and I think it's safe to say always difficult to depict. And yet when it does happen, then there is an extraordinary kind of beauty that is simply generated from it. Knowing what the tiger is, what it is to be a tiger. You see, that tiger is a real tiger, the way the scapegoat was not a real goat. This is a tiger which is filled with tigerness, with what it is. It's again that Dasein, it's that being of a tiger that is the thing which the artist sees, and the thing which he's able to put down. That's even when you see it, it's not a matter of how easy it is, far from it. And this Chinese painting of a monkey mother and her baby, and this tiny little thing, the way she's holding it, and the sense of the mother and the infant being absolutely one, and it's so filled with such an extraordinary quality. Let's look at the next two. I suppose that one of the things that produces, as a side effect, beauty is a passionate knowledge and love of something. And exactly as Cézanne felt that, George Stubbs felt that about horses. And he felt it so much that he wanted so much to make the horse that he knew and loved, and he was devoted his life to them, really what they were, that he is a perfect example of loving knowledge, being willing to go through anything in order to reach itself, and with that the production of beauty. So that he would buy dead horses and anatomize them until he knew everything about the horse. And he trained horses, so he knew everything about the living horse and the dead horse, and then he painted the horses with the same, it's loving knowledge. It's knowledge which is simply founded in love and is total. And when that happens, beauty is a part of it. And the grace of the horse and the grace of the man holding it, the whole, I think beauty always has not as just a seriousness, but something of a quality of repose or quality of ease. And that he reaches. Let's look at the next two. And it's Cézanne. It's the same business, the same thing of loving knowledge, finally being able to come to the conclusion of beauty. And the knowledge, of course, that Cézanne had was of just the mountain that he painted, just Mont Saint-Victoire, it was something which you think, can rarely happen anyway. It's dedication which is like sainthood. So that all the time, every day, he'd make I don't know how many sketches of it, looking at it in every kind of way, and always with this passion, always with this aim, and the whole world. How will we get at that? And he extended himself as completely as he possibly could as an artist to grasp that quality of truth that becomes beauty. Let's look at our next two. And of course, Vermeer imposes on the world, or finds in the world rather, through the same kind of devotion, the order, the harmony, the proportion, that turns the ordinary world into something of extraordinary beauty. And the woman reading a letter, the light that comes in, the absolute solidity you feel. See, you forget when you look at this that it is a two-dimensional thing. The world is so real, but not real in the sense of being dragged into reality, but real because it holds its own nature, because it is there, and it is full of its own being, that therefore it becomes beautiful. Let's look at the next two. Chardin is both of these still life. You see that exactly that same quality, that how completely they are there, and how totally they occupy their own space with their own solidity, their own actuality, how rhythmical the arrangement is, how there's an ascendancy, and how complete the harmony is in the color. And how when you look at it, you feel that nothing is needed. It doesn't need anything. It is there, and that it will not change. It has a monumentality that comes directly from the devotion, from the absolute devotion to the truth, the reality of the thing. Not with humility and with tenderness and with love. Let's look at the next two. Extraordinary examples from opposite sides of the world, from distances in time. the achievement, the perfect achievement of the technique of brush and ink, of sumi painting, you have to know what is happening in both of these, because you can enjoy it without it, but when you know that is Li Po over on the right, the great Tang poet, reciting his poetry. Now, it was painted long after he was dead, but it conveys that the bird-like reality of the poet, of the way that the poems come from him exactly as birdsong, and the ease and the mastery of the line that makes us believe in his feet, for instance, which are nothing but little drops of ink. Believe in his hair, so that he is there. He is possessing himself and there. Exactly as in the Rembrandt Lucretia, who, as you remember the story, Lucretia her husband was away and she was raped by her guest, Tarquin, and because this dishonored him and her with that kind of moral scrupulosity that believes everyone is responsible for everything that happens to them, that they are responsible, Lucretia had to kill herself. And Rembrandt understands the poignancy of that and shows it to us with an extraordinary directness and with an extraordinary beauty. Let's look at the next two slides. Over on the left, you have one of the great Chinese paintings by Mu Qi called The Six Persimmons. And this is a vision, an exact vision of persimmons, of the nature of them. It's exactly the same thing which Cézanne was trying to find through color. And the way they sit there, the way they are arranged, is endlessly interesting. It's endlessly surprising and interesting. And the more you look at it, the more their emphases seem to shift. The oldest persimmon, who is also the ripest persimmon, therefore has the softest bottom, sits with absolute solidity, you see, in the middle of those four. And then the one in front is maybe petitioning him. Everything turns into a drama. Everything turns into psychological relationships between these forms so that they become something much more than persimmons, much larger than persimmons. They are the center figure with the two attendants. And the one little timid one, who's quite green, you see, he's still far from ripe, has a very uneasy bottom, therefore, and a much more timid twist to his stem, so that they enter into a whole psychological world that's far greater. And yet they have this extraordinary kind of shifting relationship. The more you look at them, the more you reinterpret them and re-understand them. And their own reality in all their black and white is an astonishment. And over on the left, you see, we never really know any of the things which are important to know. We never really know what beauty is. We never really know what truth is. We never really know, so that we can hold on to it and keep it absolutely our own. Any of the valuable things. Love, beauty, truth. The painting over on the left is a painting called The Tearing Up of the Sutras. The Sutras are the holy writings. And the monk is tearing them up. The sutras continue to exist, but they are torn up. Thank you very much.
the name of the authoress of Adam's Task? Is Vicky?
Oh, Hearn, H-E-A-R-N-E.
H-E-A-R-N.
Vicky. Yeah.
Thank you for your lecture.
Oh,
It's such a wonderful gift to give people. We've enjoyed them.
I'm so
Tremendously.
You'll love that book. It's just, it's long. Celebration of beauty. One of the things which I think is in a way a little difficult to understand, and that is the way that a certain kind of truth can be beautiful, is beautiful. And it's something that it has to do with our eyes. I mean, our eyes are our most active sense, and they're the ones that we use most and are most dependent on. And of course, things like seeing is believing is something that everybody has to say in all kinds of different languages, because we believe our eyes, even though we know that they're cheaters. We know that they don't tell us the truth, and that they can easily be deceived, and that we in fact enjoy having them deceived. Otherwise, magicians wouldn't have much to do. But it is nonetheless, we still believe them, and we believe them in a special kind of way. They're also our hungriest sense. The eyes are constantly looking for something. You know, they move all the time, and that's day and night. They keep scanning the dreams that we have, and they just are constantly shifting and moving and roving and winking. And it's their nature. They're looking for something to look at. They're looking for something that will feed them. And they are, I think, really insatiable. And our society, of course, gives them more to eat than any other society, I think, ever did in the world. We are constantly bombarded with sights and with the greatest variety of sights, and moving and light and strange shapes and every kind of thing. It keeps our eyes wonderfully fulfilled. It may be a little hard on just what used to be called the fine arts. It may even be hard on anything which is beautiful, because there's such an enormous range and variety of experience for the eyes that they in a sense, they don't need, or they don't have the time for, or the space really for just looking at something which is beautiful. And I think we all really suffer from that. But it's nonetheless true that it's one of our greatest delights. And of course, the visual arts have been devoted for 5,000 years to satisfying the eyes in some different kinds of ways, either in terms of beauty or in terms of the extraordinariness or strangeness or something which, as we say, catches the eye. And see the eyes moving all the time, and then they're caught by something, and they're caught by a bright color, or they're caught by a strange shape, or they're caught by all kinds of things. And it's their delight to be caught. And this is, the artist, the visual artist, has known this forever. And then, of course, there's also the fact that when we see something, even if, not that we even have to like it or care a great deal about it or anything like that, just seeing it, we want to hold it there, to stop it there, and in a way to prevent time from going on. And it's possible that everything that the visual artist ever does is an effort to stop time, to make it possible for us to see something which otherwise would be lost, because we'd be lost in time. And everybody's had that experience. And of course, for our time, the great joy for people is the camera, so that some people go around hung with cameras all the time, and it's understandable, you see, because then anytime they see something marvelous, and you never can remember those things, you never can really remember them item by item, then you take a picture of it, and then you have it, and you don't have it, but you think you have it, or it seems as if you have it, or you almost have it, or it's better than nothing is what it finally turns out to be, I guess. But it is something that we want to do. And then beyond that, people really like to draw. I mean, there's a pleasure in it. I just read an article not too long ago that elephants like to draw. And I was so surprised and delighted, and it's taken our time for people to realize that, because the elephants are not representational in their drawing, you see. They tend to go in for large movement, and as you could perfectly expect them to do, but they'll take up a nail or a stone in their trunk and draw on the ground in the sand in front of them. And apparently they've always been doing that. And they just make great, wonderful loops. And they do it. I mean, it's not like those chimpanzees, that people have taught, have arranged for them to draw. That is, they sit them in front of a piece of paper and give them paints and say, try that. And so then they do. But the elephants have never had anybody schooling them. They just have the pleasure of making these large, sweeping motions. They're really a little bit like sumi, like Oriental drawing or painting. And people now, of course, you can imagine, save them, and they probably sell them for all I know. I mean, you might have an elephant drawing on your wall. It's got a very large wall. So there's a real pleasure in seeing something closely enough to set it down, and people have always liked to do that, enjoyed doing that, if they ever got started on it. And this desire to make time stop means that there have been people looking closely at the world and setting it down for a long time, to the delight of other people, so that their eyes get this great joy. And let's look at some examples of it, because I have some wonderfully exact images for you. This one delights me so much, because you see, it's not thinking how cute dogs are. It's not thinking a particular kind of dog. It's not. It simply is the sheer pleasure in seeing the movement of a body and seeing the way their wonderful toes and but see, it's seeing it with such exactitude. There's nothing blurred about it. There's just a real pleasure of the eye walking all around this, you see, making it, looking into the way the curve of the back and all of the muscles and bones that it's close, attentive looking at. And it was done in the 13th, 14th century, and it was done for this real joy of setting down. It hasn't any story that goes with it. And over on the right, another marvelous, that's done by a contemporary artist, Colville. Just the pleasure that it gives our eyes to see something that is so lifelike, so we would say, so real, so lifelike, as we get that a great joy out of it. And it is something which is constant in the history of art, and it's a pleasure, a special pleasure for all of us, because it shows how really unchanging the world is. And when people talk to you about that we don't know, we can't, what we see is not what really is there, and we never can know reality and all that, that's undoubtedly true. But nonetheless, the thing which we do know is marvelously constant. And that is the appearance of the world, the actual appearances of the world. And so the years of distance, the actual hundreds of years of distance between these two artists would not be conspicuous to them at all. And they still would be, both would know what it is to see something and want to set it down, and set it down with great accuracy, so that the eye has this wonderful journey that it can move through. It moves through the whole motion of the animal, and it moves through the feeling of the turning of the animal and the world in which it lives, and that's delightful to us. Let's look at the next two slides. And of course, when it's people, it's even more something which interests us, because after all, we are people, and we are delighted when we see people. And here are artists who are over 1,000 years apart, and they're looking at two men who would have a perfectly wonderful time if they knew each other, wouldn't they? Or maybe they would hate each other because they're terribly alike. And there's the same kind of gloominess about them both. And you feel, when you look at this, of course, it's a kind of an affirmation of our own selves, of the human being. And there he was 1,000 years ago, looking like somebody that you know, and here's another one that's only 600 years ago, 500 years ago, and he also looks like somebody that you know. It's a real human being that you feel that you encounter. And the pleasure of the eye in what it seems, in a sense, it confirms the eye in its conviction of its own rightness, and its conviction that it does tell us the truth. It does tell us and show us the world in a true way. Let's look at the next two. There are two more that could be quite good friends, and this one over here is on the 15th century on the left, and the one on the right is about the 2nd century A.D. So it's a long time between. But to people, really, they've been looking the same and being the same, and don't you for a moment believe that everything is tied up in some kind of cultural business that makes us all alien to each other if we're 10 years apart, much less 1,000. And we're not, you see. And when we look at this, we feel that wonderful continuity of human life. And we have the delight of the eye, the exactitude with which this was seen, the whole effort to know. The one on the right is Roman, and the Romans were just absolutely devoted to images of themselves. And they tried making casts of their faces, and they found out that doesn't give the face right, because the weight of whatever's being cast, whatever's casting, pushes the face into funny shapes and flattens it and pulls it down, does all kinds of funny things. So they had to they were driven to make an accurate portrait. They wanted one, and there isn't any way to do it except to make it by sculpting it or by painting it. There isn't any other way. And they found that out, and then that's what they did. So let's look at the next two. And of course, it's so marvelous to see pairs of people, and this is, of course, one of the ways in which these people became immortal, literally immortal. We know their names. We know who they were. We can find out a great deal about them. The Egyptians, wanted to make a record of every single thing that ever happened. They wanted it all written down, and they had a whole lot of people hired to do nothing but write them down. And they wanted their names preserved, and they tried their very best to do that. Of course, they tried to preserve everything, but here is Rahotep and Nofert, husband and wife, and they look exactly like people that you know or that you've seen. You could meet them anywhere. And there's something always when we see these husband and wife, and when we see it shown to us with that kind of marvelous clarity and exactitude, and that way in which the artist says this is the way it is. This is the real image of these people. There's no flattery, there's no effort to make it something else. It simply is saying this is it. And when we see that, and we have the same wonderful delight that you have, it's sort of like gossip, you know. And you think that maybe this isn't an ideal pair. There's something a little wispy about the man, and the woman is very firmly there, you know. She is completely and totally there. And the same thing is true on those wonderful other people, because the one, if ever you saw a flirtatious and ironic and playful woman, that is Reglind, as she's called, looking over at her husband, whose name is Herman, and who is lost in the stars. You see, he's somebody that has been seized by the spiritual life and has weakened him totally, so that he can't even hold his head up, you see. He's just dreaming away on that cathedral, and there she is, saying, well, if you aren't the nut of the world, you know, turning away from him in this way. And you see, you can't help that. Why? Because the artist has made it absolutely clear, so clear by presenting the physical world that we know something about the psychological world, exactly as we do in real life. So that power is something endlessly delights us. Let's look at the next two, because you have also some medieval pair of Eckhart and Uta. And there again, you see, it was a time, of course, when marriage was largely a matter of arrangement, and the arrangement was certainly unfortunate here, if there's anything to the meaning of gesture and the meaning of the physical being, because he is the largest roughneck you ever saw, you know, and you can imagine a man who looks like that. What else could he be, you know, but loud and given to huge appetites. And what is she, you see? So she's got her cloak turned against him and is literally turning away. You know, what an extraordinary thing. Because it creates a whole drama, a whole soap opera right there in those two figures and those two gestures, and his absolute indifference or ignorance of what's going on in her face. And look at her. And you see, she is obviously, I hope she's thinking about somebody that she loves. Because otherwise she's in despair, you know. She's turned entirely away and is trying to hide from that coarseness and that heaviness of the man. Let's look at the next two. One of the most famous and one of the most marvelously achieved realistic paintings in the world, and I use realistic now in quotation marks, because here you have the eye of the artist simply delighting in every single thing. It's like a marvelous map of the world. It moves over it as carefully and as devotedly over the drapery and over the fruit in the window and over the mirror in the background. Everything, it moves over that with the same absolute dedication and delight that it uses when it approaches the figures. And this is a painting which we see now in this size, and actually it's smaller than 3 feet at its widest, at its tallest. It's a small painting, but it's a world which is like a gem. It's like, and you feel when you look in it, its clarity and its absolute conviction and its marvelous patience and devotion to the appearance of things, that it can't fail to rejoice us, because we have that same delight. And everything has, it is it's marriage painting, actually painting of the marriage. And at the time it was painted, the marriages were really not recorded very carefully, except among the highest nobility. And most people didn't get married until they were pregnant, a custom which has entirely disappeared, I suppose. Maybe not. And this becomes a kind of certificate, marriage certificate. And it also, of course, has endless as everything. See, at that time, in the 15th century, the world was thought of in this way as unlike ours as possible. Everything had meaning. Everything had not only one meaning, but dozens of meaning. So that when something is happening, which is a sacrament of the marriage, then you have to take your shoes off. And so his shoes are taken off. The hope is that you will be forever faithful, so there's a dog, because the dog represents faithfulness. And wherever it occurs, wherever it appears, it represents the quality of absolute loyalty and absolute devotion and faithfulness. And then the marriage bed beside them, and in the carving of the headboard, the most elaborate symbolisms around St. Margaret, who was the patron saint of childbirth, and same also in the mirror. And yet the people are seen, you see, with the same kind of marvelous exactitude, and some way you feel as though it's an objective view, in the right sense. Not objective in the sense that it doesn't see any meaning or particular, that it doesn't impose any kind of meaning. It imposes every kind of meaning, but they're not personal meanings. There's not just the artist expressing himself. It's the artist as devotedly observing the world and the appearance of the world as he possibly can. And so it's always stood as one of the great paintings of the world. Let's look at the next two. I have two details from it. You get some sense again of the marvelous way that by seeing this man's face, we see what he is. And he is a banker. And it's not a man you could easily get a loan from, I'm quite sure. The whole meaning of his face, without any kind of pointing at it, without any kind of underlining or exaggeration or caricature, the meaning of it is a kind of intensity and coldness that is immediately evident to us. And of course, then we delight in being able to see these things because we are human beings ourselves and find our species endlessly interesting to us and endlessly perplexing. Let's look at the next two. Just a minute. Look those back for a second, because this is one of the few paintings which is signed at this time, and it says that Johannes Jan van Eyck was here. And he's just, and you see, what we're looking at is the mirror, the back of these people, and apparently somebody, the artist, as witness in front of them. And this, you can imagine how tiny, this is, but all with this extraordinary luminosity. So that you have one thing that everybody who's ever written anything about beauty or thought anything about beauty, the fact that it's terribly well made, that it is well made. And it is well made not only in that this is extraordinary, so that when we see it, we're just amazed at the sheer technical skill of it, aside from all the other things. But also, the technical skill in the painting of it is such that the surface is absolutely like enamel at the present moment. It is so perfectly, it is made with such absolute craftsmanship. And this was the very beginning of oil painting. It's made with such consummate craftsmanship that it has never aged at all. Now, that gives you something to think about when you consider that Jackson Pollock's, there's somebody assigned who does nothing but restore Jackson Pollock's. That's his work. The idea of the thing being made as perfectly as possible and being with the same kind of devotion, the same kind of total commitment to the thing that is true of all the rest of it. Let's look at the next two, because there you have that's a quite incredible painting over on the right. It's also by Van Eyck, but it's we know that the person looked like this, and we know it. You see, the artist is not trying to impose his interpretation, or he thinks that the world is enough, that it doesn't need any kind of trimming, it doesn't need any kind of anything on his part except a humble and devoted attention. That's all that it needs. And then when it can be shown, it is something which is ravishing to our eyes. It's delightful. It's endlessly delightful to us to move. This is only a detail. Both of these are details. And look at this. This is, you feel, see, this is what a photograph can do, or tries to do. And this is, again, it's a 16th century, the end of it. But the tear in the man's jacket, and the chair, and the food on the table, everything is wonderful. It is as if the world were, let's look at the next two, if the world were open to an endless examination, a most devoted and exact examination. It's the kind of thing as if you had been blind and you could suddenly see. And the dazzling quality of the wonderful detail and elaboration and marvel of nature is right there. And the artist is as delighted as possible to show it. This is a self-portrait. And it's so delightful, so wonderful. Sorry, the slide is kind of dirty. But you see, we feel as though he's talking right to us. We feel as though he's immediately present, and we're part of his world and part of something which is really very, very marvelous and very funny. And his own eyes are so bright and so strong, and the whole thing that we see this is done in pastel. But it is, again, an absolute command of the medium. Let's look at the next. And of course, to make anything which strikes us, which catches our eye, because it seems to be the world we know. It seems to be the truth of the matter. It seems to be what is actually true. Any time that the artist can do that, he has to have enormous skill. It's not something which can be done at all easily. It's something which is, and of course, and when it's a matter of painting, the illusion of the three-dimensional world that we live in has to be achieved for it to have this kind of impact on us, to have this feeling of immediacy and of delight. Let's look at the next two. There's another Caravaggio, and you feel the voluptuous quality of the world, and the whole sense of the softness of skin, and there's something which is, of course, decayed about it. There's something which is overly soft and squashy, really. But the actual technique and the painting is so sharp and so clear that it still is able to delight our eyes, to make our eyes have the trip, the delightful trip through the drapery and into all the fruit, and you can see that, and the hand, and the glass. I mean, it is the eye of the artist has extended itself to be as exact and as powerful and as brilliant and as sly as it can possibly be. And it makes it, you see, so that we see this, we know that this is the way it looked. Now let's look at the next slide. Well, kind of move that over a little. We don't want the poor people to be attacked by the goat. People always want to know what is real. They always have and they always will. They want to know what is the meaning of things, what is real, what is true. I believe that that's something that all people desperately want. And if they feel that it's sliding away from them, or that they can't manage it, they can't find it, they can't hold on to it, that this is a cause of the deepest despair. And the sense of what is real is as great a need for us as food or as clothing or as shelter, and is so much so that if you begin to feel that, if anyone begins to feel that it's impossible to reach any kind of truth, that it is really that we are condemned to falsity or condemned to ignorance, is a despair which leads to suicide, leads to death. Not to know that you don't know and that you cannot know what is really true is something that I think as human beings. Now I know I have that faith of mine that we long for truth, exactly as we long for beauty. That faith of mine gets some severe shocks, of course, every time I go to the supermarket and read the National Enquirer on the surface. I begin to wonder that perhaps people don't care very much, about the truth. The things like woman dead 3 years gives birth to twins, and it's the kind of thing that they top themselves every day or every week or whenever it comes out. Dog gives birth to litter of kittens. I tell myself that the people know that these things aren't true, and they just delight in them the way you would in fairy stories, which of course are 1,000 times truer. But it is a little shattering when you see that. But characteristically, I think we want to know what's true. We want to know what's real. And we long for that. It's not just an idle desire, it's an absolute desire. And the artist is no different, and naturally he's in exactly the same boat that we are. Any artist at any time is in the same boat that all of us are in. And if he is to find out what is true, he has the same problem that we have. And it's exactly what happens, you see. Now, the painting which you saw just before seems artificial to us, or in a way unreal, no matter how exactly the artist has made that figure and that person, and no matter how much we believe that it is real, we know that it's posed. We know that it's arranged or posed, and we can feel that destroys its final reality. And the artist is constantly trying to get at the reality of the world. It's the only thing that he always does it. Naturally he does it, not only because we all want reality, we want the truth, but because the artist, to make any kind of a work of art, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. It simply requires an investment of the self, and to invest the self in something which you know is not real and to be frivolous or trivial is distressing to all of us. So his search for what is real is compounded by his desire and his need to set it down, and because he is stating it. He is placing it in front of us and saying, this is real. And you can see in these two things, I'm showing you the painting over on the right, which is by Courbet, a 19th century painting. I'm showing you it in black and white because it's so much like a photograph, isn't it? It's exactly the time the photograph was invented. And the photograph was invented to do exactly what it does. That is to show the surface of the world unposed, nothing fancy and nothing special about it. No great king or prince or story or myth or beauty or anything, just the world. And the artists were doing it at that time, and so the photographer, the beginning of photography was exactly like that. That's what they wanted to do. And in fact, of course, they thought that it was a machine which would put the artist out of work. They thought it was just like the harvester or the reaper or any of the things which were the great machines which were invented to ease the work of farmers. They thought that the photograph would mean that nobody had to paint any pictures anymore, that they would just never have to. And of course the comedy is that since the invention of the photograph, the number of people who paint pictures has increased geometrically. I mean, it is unbelievable at the present time. Instead of stopping people, it started people on painting. And they have continued it right to the present time. They're perfectly, an absolute deluge of paintings, and at the same time that photographs also are. And now this is part our eyes, the need that our eyes have to see things, and the need that we all have to stop things so that time isn't as oppressive, and also simply the sheer delight of doing it, which wasn't thought of as so much. Now, in the one over on the right, there's obviously the person has looked at people who are working on stone breaking, and he's painted it as closely and as much like it as he possibly could, looking with the same kind of wonderful mapping intention. He's made a map of this, from which you can learn what it is to do this, exactly as you could learn from a map. But you can't, of course, do much more than that. You can't do much beyond that. And in the one over here on the left, you have the scapegoat. Now, here, the artist has to try to find what it is that is going to be real. He has to puzzle it out, because we don't get, since the 19th century, we haven't had the same kind of faith in the actuality of anything, in the reality of anything. And the artist longs for that, as we all do, but he must find something. And it may be just by looking at the most extraordinary, the most unimportant, but with the most extraordinarily exact vision. Or it may be, as in this instance, this is the scapegoat, that was the sins of the people were put on the goat, and the goat was driven out into the wilderness to die. Now, that's an enormous idea. It's a great, mysterious idea, this transference of sin to something else, to the animal which is sacrificed. But the artist who painted this wanted to get it exactly right. He wanted to get it absolutely the way it was. Now, you can't do that. You can't do it. But he was so determined that he went to the Holy Land and to the Dead Sea. And he got a Holy Land goat, and he stood it in the Dead Sea, and he said, "Now I've got it." See, but of course, what he had was a 19th century goat in the 19th century world. But he said, this is the only way that I can get to the reality of what happened. This is the only way. I can do it exactly as a scientist does, by simply isolating and finding as many things as I can which are exactly like it, and putting them together, and then it will be exactly like it. And the result, of course, was satisfying, I guess, to an extent to him, but not really, and not to us. So it's a delight to see this, to see, again, through our eyes. We don't care, our eyes don't care. They rather like things which are perplexing or convoluted and overly detailed. We enjoy that because it gives us something for our eyes to do. Let's look at the next slide. So that actually, from the 19th century right to the present moment, the problem which the artist has had is what is real. How can I find what is true? How can I make that a part of my imagery? How can I actually do this? And he may do as of course many artists did. He may feel that the real world is revealed by science, and the more scientifically something is approached, the closer it gets to a reality. And consequently, you had somebody like Constable, who was absolutely as devoted to discovering and finding out what was the real world like, and is disappointed with the efforts of other artists and previous artists to depict things. He's famously, someone said to him, looking at his pictures, well, but that grass is so green. Grass is really the color of an old violin. And Constable fortunately had an old violin and put it on the grass. And you see, it was a refreshing vision, a vision which said, I will look with all of my power and with as impersonal, as humble a way as I can at what is really there. And so he goes and studies the clouds and rainstorms and writes on the back of the paintings what day it is and what the temperature was and where the wind was coming from. Making out of this, you see, a genuine experiment, a controlled experiment, in the sense that then he has literally pages of information about the weather, about the light, about the movement of the clouds. It is a touching and of course wonderfully refreshing effort to get at the real world. Let's look at the next two. And all artists really have this. You can feel that what we see, and over, human beings have thought this, that the world that we see is really only a semblance. It's just the appearance of things, and that behind it there is some kind of solidity, some kind of something which doesn't change. And some artists, as Cézanne, for instance, felt that really everything had a geometric reality. It was solids of cone and solids of squares and cubes, and it was something which only has a surface appearance that you have to ignore. You have to get at its reality. And Dürer, over on the right, is doing exactly the same thing, you see, in the 16th century. He's saying that the face, the surfaces of the face, the things that we see and that we know and we recognize about people is only the surface. And what the artist has to know, even if he doesn't show it, you see, he has to know what this actual geometry is. What is the real structure of the head? And by the real one, it's not, you see, the surface one. It is actually the one which is hidden from us. And so the artist may try endlessly to find this. And in the instance of Cézanne, he did. He spent literally his artistic life trying to find the true world. And was always disappointed in it. Always felt that he could not find it and it's nothing. That's nothing new, also, because again, over and over, through the history of mankind, people have felt that reality behind appearance cannot be known, cannot really be reached. Let's look at the next two. Over on the right, you have a still life of apples, and over on the left, the man who painted it. Courbet, one of my favorite, he painted a great many self-portraits, and he was delighted by himself anyway. He was a handsome man and active and perfect romantic hero, and he was so charmed enough by himself so that he just endlessly painted pictures of himself as somebody dying or wounded or, very romantically. And this painting is called Bonjour, Monsieur Courbet, and that's exactly what it is. He is a Descartesian, a perfect Cartesian man, Courbet was. He believed that nothing existed except what could be measured, what could be weighed, and what could be counted. Nothing else had any reality. And he said famously, if I ever see an angel, I'll be happy to paint one. He was not happy to paint anything that he couldn't see. And he had no belief, you see, that anything was beyond what he could see. Now let's look at the next one over here on the left. You see, there's Cézanne painting apples too. And here you have the world on the right, the world of appearance, accurately seen, closely observed, believed to be absolutely real. And over on the left you have the world of Cézanne, in which the reality is the order of it, the order of things. The reality is the substantiality and weight of things, not their surface only. Their surface is used, but it's not. It isn't the reality. The reality is the quality, the really architectonic quality, the sense in which something is built, the sense in which something can support weight. And Cézanne said, what everybody has to know, that the reality of the world is just as much in what you bump your legs on in the dark as it is in something which is revealed by sunlight, because he was at the time of the Impressionists. And it's true, we run up against the world, and no matter if it's nothing but waves of energy, that doesn't make any difference. It can still bark your shins, and can still trip you up, and do all kinds of things which have their own very strong reality. Let's look at the next one over on the right. And of course, Cézanne's effort was an absolutely devoted one, which he applied himself, he applied his whole self to discovering the reality of the world, and spent his whole life doing it. And he had to do this through landscapes and still life, because people don't stand still, you see. They move all the time, and therefore you're constantly being thrown off by the shifting of the appearance. So he spent his time trying to convey what it is about the natural world, the world that we look at, the thing which we call landscape, that is not anything having to do with the clouds or the weather or the light or any of those things, but having to do instead with the power and the forces of the weight of the world. Let's look at the next two. Now, it's some artists of the present time, really, it's something which happens over and over again, but it's most wonderfully illustrated by a man named Albright, Ivan Albright. It's as if they felt that the secret of reality can be seized, it can be literally snatched away, if you are determined enough and patient enough and simply do not let the least